In this video, we're going to look at reading for guidance in responding to exercises in your textbook. I'm going to talk about a few things, but basically using the context of Chapter 4 of QMaths 12a by Brody and Swift. This chapter is all about exploring data. Now, like many of the chapters in your mathematics textbooks, the questions or exercises that you see at the end of each section often come in the form, first of all, of just basically straightforward mathematical techniques, followed by some problems which are more contextualized. We often call them modeling and problem solving exercises. Modeling and problem solving exercises are sometimes thought of as being fairly different from the straightforward technique questions, often because of the language that's used and the fact that they're written or spoken about in different ways from the other mathematical questions. So in this video, I'm going to talk about one approach that you might want to use when you're trying to go about finishing off and solving those modeling and problem solving questions. Questions related to knowledge, procedures and techniques, like these ones that you can see on the screen right now, are often written in ways that facilitate quite easily being transported across to the formulas and techniques that are presented in a section of a textbook. There's no obfuscation from different contexts or trying to apply these things to real-world situations, just sets of numbers and directions to find certain values by calculation. On the other hand, modeling and problem-solving questions, like these, often come up with questions that have some sort of real-world context to them. The numbers have meaning other than just being numbers. For example, here we're talking about time in hours and a number or a quantity. In this particular case of students who spent a certain amount of time at their computer. And below, there's a story about reliability of dishwashers, long chunks of text here, and then some tables of values as well. Returning to the problem at the top, the question that we're asked at the end is no longer just what is the mean, median, or mode, but something again contextualized. What was the typical time spent on a computer? It's when things start to be written in this way that they move away from being the standard technique and procedure questions that seem to be much easier to port across to formulas and techniques that are shown in the text. The thing is, while they might be harder to solve these problems, the fact that they appear in a certain section of a textbook kind of indicates that they really are still just trying to show you how to apply the same techniques and procedures, but in different scenarios. So one of the ways I always go about trying to work through these problems is to have a look right back to the basics of what exactly is that section of the text all about. Because that suggests what you'll be asked to do and what you should be looking for in the questions that you're given, even if they are the modeling and problem solving questions. So the first thing that I would suggest doing is something that probably sounds quite obvious, but if you haven't done it, then you probably need to. And that is to read over the section of the text itself. Read through the text, the procedures that are shown, and the examples that are given. Jot down key ideas and any formulas that you see, and make sure you've got these kept in your notes for later use. Once you've got that idea of what the section of text is about, you've probably got a pretty good idea of what's going to be asked in the exercises. Once you've looked through the more fundamental technique and procedure questions and moving on to the modeling and problem solving questions, make sure that when you read the question, read it once just for the meaning of the context and the ideas that are in there. But then read it again, but this time thinking about what that section of the textbook was about, trying to link these two things together. Think to yourself, in what ways does this question reflect the kinds of ideas and formulas that you saw shown in the earlier parts of the section? Think about the questions that you're asked. How can they be related to the formulas and ideas that were shown earlier? And finally, formulate a plan for how you're going to go about answering the question. What technique is it, or what formula was it maybe, that's going to help you get through this question? Which ones can be applied? And start to ignore the ones which can't. Think back whether any of the examples provided in the section was similar to this one, and see if that can help you in formulating your plan for getting through. And finally, make sure that you know exactly what the question is that you're being asked to answer. And when you get through applying your technique or formula, look back to see if you've answered that question.